Hello and welcome to Starcast from Planet Waves. I'm Eric Francis Coppolino, your friendly neighborhood global village astrologer, here with the edition for April 10th, accompanying the weekly readings for all 12 signs and rising signs, and the article addressing the whole scam around the astrology of the tariffs, all that going on with Mercury and or Venus retrograde, another big bipolar borderline personality syndrome drama from what is now the, let's say, the entirely staged presidency of the United States. We really don't know who is calling the shots, but I'm not here to comment about politics. I am here to talk about astrology and the synchronous station direct of Venus after a 6-week retrograde, and that is timed with the full moon. So these two events manifest in experience as one event and will be pretty much indistinguishable. Also, a personal note, on the 13th, on Sunday, is the 30th anniversary of writing my first horoscope column. That was on April 13th, 1995, written in the town of Rosendale, New York. If I have a moment at the end of this program, I will comment a bit on that, and I'm planning to do a segment of Planet Waves FM on Friday night talking about what it has been like writing this, the very strangest and potentially most interesting writing assignment of my life, the one that I never, ever thought that I would be doing, at least up until right around that day, because it was kind of a same-day thing. I decided on April 13th that I was going to write a horoscope, and then I sat down and I wrote 2 of them, and they basically were published the next day in a newspaper called Free Time in Poughkeepsie, New York, where they ran for years. All right, so as far as this 1-2 of the full moon and Venus direct, let's take them one at a time. This would count as a significant Aries event, this full moon. It is occurring with the Sun in an exact conjunction to Chiron, and that means that the moon is opposite both the Sun and Chiron. So you get Chiron in the mix, and there can be various forms of provocation, internal dynamics, interpersonal dynamics, emotional experiences, all with the kind of emotional high tide of the full moon. Though the full moon in Libra, air sign, perhaps a little bit mellower than most. However, the moon is square Mars. Mars still working its way through the retrograde that began in early December in Leo. Mars still working its way forward through Cancer. Mars at 27, the moon at 23 degrees, which means that pretty much the first thing that happens after the full moon, besides Venus stationing direct, is that the moon squares Mars. And there's always the likelihood for there to be some anger, including inwardly directed anger, with the moon square Mars. What the square is really calling for is some form of concrete, tangible, productive action, but it doesn't usually work out that way. So in terms of this configuration, though, of Sun conjunct Chiron, here is where we need to pause and investigate something that is largely invisible in our world and largely held to be meaningless, which is the wounded masculine. That is Sun conjunct Chiron. Sun, masculine, Chiron, wounded. Not always expressing itself that way. It really depends on the form that the injury and the healing process express themselves through. What is the consciousness and the awareness around that, and is the opportunity for healing taken And is there a step up in the world that is possible by the acknowledgement that there is something to think about, that there is a situation, and we live in a world where there are a lot of very seriously injured men, and there's not a lot of attention paid to them. Most people do not care about them. They are almost universally considered some form of enemy of the people. By the way, feminism began, what we call second wave feminism began with a book in 1949 by Simone de Beauvoir, who proposed in that book that men would not be necessary because women could just clone, and then we'd have a planet of all women. They wouldn't even need men as sperm donors. This is the founding document of second wave feminism. I bet you didn't know that. The book's called The Second Sex by de Beauvoir, 1949. Skip ahead to the 2020s, and there is the biannual book published, Are Men Obsolete? The latest has stamped onto the cover in red, kind of graphically, as part of the cover design, Are Men Obsolete? Termination pending. Now, if that doesn't upset anyone with the meekest humanitarian tendencies, or just simply somebody who loves their brothers and fathers and partner, husband, uncle, cousin, a lot of men roaming around, why are we advertising that men are facing termination? Time magazine actually published an article called "Men Are Obsolete?" No question mark. What is going on? And I will acknowledge that it violates the feminist code of conduct for me to even say these words. So be it. An article in Time magazine, "Men Are Obsolete"? I mean, you really have to be kidding, but they're not. That's the problem. And so the Sun-Chiron conjunction calls to awareness a significant situation that men and boys are facing, which is the mere notion in society, the mere concept that they might be useless or obsolete. And this was introduced 76 years ago with the publication of The Second Sex, considered one of the great works of literature of the 20th century, written by the wife of Jean-Paul Sartre, one of the great existential philosophers of the 20th century. This is somehow allowed to exist. There was a big protest, something hands-off, I think, something like that, and it was on Saturday, and, I live next to the LGBTQIAEF Center, and saw a guy walking down the street, kind of a, later middle-aged guy with an ACT UP shirt, and I stopped him and said, "Hey, what's that? Tell me about that shirt." "Yeah, were you involved with ACT UP, the AIDS Coalition to Unleash Power?" "Hey, did you know my friend Mike Rogers?" "No." "Did you participate in the die-in?" "Well, there were many." No, I mean the first die-in with John Cardinal O'Connor." "Oh, no, I didn't do that." I said, well, having established some rapport and deep knowledge of the gay movement of the 1980s, I said, "By the way, what are we doing for straight men?" He said, "Nothing." "Well, who cares?" I said, "Well, we're all men. It's not, gay or straight." I didn't say just because you suck cock makes you special. Gay or straight, we're all men. He said, "Nah, not interested. That's not my issue." Turned around and walked away. Not my issue. See you later. Well, that's interesting. This is the perfect divide and conquer. And the situation men face is grave. We have 93% of prison inmates are men. 93%. We really think that 93% of outlaws and criminals are men? Men commit suicide at 4 times the rate of women. Vietnam War, 55,000 men killed, 50 women killed. What is going on? Why are men considered expendable? Why is there, World Women's Day, and there's not a day honoring the guys who come into your house and rescue you and your kittens when the building is burning? What about a day to honor the electrical linemen who rebuild the power grid after a tornado, a fire, or a flood? Well, those guys aren't really obsolete, are they? I mean, somebody's got to rebuild the power grid. 95% of firefighters are men. Chances are, if your house is burning down, the person who comes in to get you and your kittens out is going to be a dude. And this is only the tip of the iceberg. The insults and the accusations are rampant. And in a world where there is this idea, this concept that men are obsolete, that is not questioned, in a world where I read an article in the New York Times which said, "Mothers, how are you going to warn your sons they may be a rapist?" By sons, she meant teenage and preteen sons. New York Times advocating for emotional and psychological abuse of young men. I didn't see an article in the New York Times warning mothers or fathers that their daughter might be a serial killer or might commit infanticide or something like that. And so Sun conjunct Chiron recognize the injuries that are dealt out to men. I'm not crying trauma here. I'm saying pay attention to this and note the many ways in which this issue is subverted. The people who advocate for men can get in serious trouble for doing so. And yet it's kind of a joke. It's not really taken seriously. But everybody is involved. We all have to live together on this planet. We all have the same basic needs, plumbing, heat, food, a place to cook, dry roof over the head, this kind of thing. We all have the same basic human condition on the planet. So I would say, in honor of Sun conjunct Chiron, first of all, thank the men in your life for doing for you what they do. And second, notice what the men in your life have been through. Notice the struggle. Notice the crisis. Notice what your father has been through. Get past the propaganda that you were told that he was such a bad guy. Is that really true? Was he such a bad guy? How do you know that for sure? So with the moon opposite the sun and Chiron, I had mentioned that the moon squares Mars. That to me seems like potentially like a very angry women. The other thing that happens right before the moon squares Mars and right as Venus stations direct is that the moon opposes Eris, because Chiron and Eris are in a conjunction, and then the sun moves into a conjunction with Eris. And so there's a lot of action concentrated in one place. Emotion's likely to be high. There's likely to be some intensity. There's likely to be a sense of a crisis that will only be worsened by trying to ignore it, by trying to not have the simple, courteous conversation that needs to happen. And part of this is not on the level of anything that would ever make it onto Oprah. Part of it is just basic, simple kindness and courtesy. And most men have noticed the hostility level rising. Why don't we put that aside for a day and honestly consider the situation that our brothers, our fathers, our partners, our cousins, our sons, our grandfathers have been put through. Generation after generation, 55,000 young men killed in the Vietnam War. No apology. Now, while this is happening, Venus is stationing direct. I think I lost my cheat sheet of when Venus station retrograde. It was back in March. And is it back in March? Yeah, it was back. It's about 6 weeks ago. Hold on a second here. Someday I'll be perfectly organized about this previous March 1st. Yeah, that would count for back in March. Venus station retrograde on March 1st. It did so in Aries. And it did so in Aries very, very close in a conjunction to a point called Salacia, and then making a lot of aspects to this thing I'm calling the Family Hunger Games aspect. By the way, special edition of StarCast has gone out by the time you're hearing this. Paid subscribers only, considering the situation of Venus direct associated with the Family Hunger Games aspect. The Family Hunger Games aspect is a structure at about 11 degrees of Capricorn and about 11 degrees of Aries. And this is the meeting place where what you might consider to be kind of innate self-actualization, the becoming of the core essence of one's being radiating out into many other layers of one's being, and the extent to which that is associated with one's sexual development. This includes as a child, as an adolescent, as a young adult, and as an adult, and the way that that gets trapped in the conditioning of society for all people. Another way, we are all in the same boat. For all people to not be who we are, to not come into our awareness. Forget about what we do. This is about awareness. This is about making contact with yourself on it's not even that deep. It's just one layer down from this kind of mask over consciousness that we call the ego, which conceals all of this stuff while forcing it to express itself in murky, shadowy ways. So Venus retrograde is involved with this because it began in a conjunction to Salacia, which is about one's authentic and, let's say, innate sexual being, at 90 degrees to the Family Hunger Games aspect. That's my name for something. Nobody else is calling it that. And that is the desperation created in families by all of the many combined layers of mishigas going back generations, and this the group in Capricorn has as its main actor Pholus, the second centaur after Chiron. Chiron discovered in 1977. Pholus discovered in 1992, a watershed year in planetary discovery. The second centaur, among other things, was discovered, and Pholus takes us back 3 generations beyond you. That means back to our great-grandparents. And there is a theme in Pholus of the multi-generational effects of alcohol. Now, simply put, right, you don't need to say all that much, but that has tremendous implications. The multi-generational effects of alcohol are to suppress emotional expression, which means to suppress the healing process, which means to hold down personal development. And then alcohol, of course, is the perfect drug to do this because it facilitates the numbness, the denial, and all of that is very painful. It's essentially an anesthetic, also extremely toxic to almost every body system, toxic to the brain, carcinogenic, and all that. And it's sold on every street corner. Wait outside the liquor store or the 7-Eleven. Somebody will soon enough go in and buy you something, even if you're 16 years old. And so we have this going down the generations, and even if you're not personally involved, the legacy. This is about the legacy. It's a 3-generation legacy beyond the great-grandparents. So somewhere in there is a legacy of what it was like to grow up in an emotionally suppressed world. Now, one of the things that men are put through is that first they must there's kind of a code of conduct of being emotionally suppressed. This code of conduct is enforced by women as well as by men. It's pretty much enforced by everyone, and most men are terrified to express their feelings. Most men are, and they are ill-equipped with the words and the examples of the process and examples in society of men who are actually grounded and sensitive. I mean, who do we really have that demonstrates this? Who's willing to speak up for this? So also in this group, this outer planet, out beyond Pluto, just a little bit past Pluto in our solar system. I don't use any planets that are not in our solar system. I'm not into the whole exoplanet shit. I think basically from an astrology standpoint, it's as close to bullshit as you can get. I don't know anybody who does. So any planet I mention is in our solar system. It's part of our collective body. Quaoar is goes much further back than Pholus. Quaoar goes back to the beginning, back to the fulcrum. Usually it's some form of a legend. And then another point called Ixion. Again, I explain this in much greater detail in the subscriber edition of Starcast, which is about the suspension of morals. Now, this is the problem with alcohol, is that it can numb people to the point where they completely suppress their moral structure. And there are plenty of people who just don't have one. And there's probably one in every family. There was one guy for whom there was no right or no wrong. It was all a matter of expediency, all a matter of power. And it's good to identify who that person was. I don't mean the sensitive person who felt guilty. I mean the person who was incapable of feeling any form of guilt or remorse, who just did what they wanted. And this includes, by the way, one of the ways you know that Ixion is in action is the squandering of second chances. People who squander their second chances usually have Ixion active in their chart. This is also accompanied by one of those weird planets without a body called Cupido. And Cupido is really just about gathering. And so it is around these things that these gatherings take place. And there's rarely a conversation of what this really means, what this is really about, what we can do about it, much less the ability to talk about it, to bring it up to the surface. And so, if you're feeling good and all that, make a little room for the people who are hurting and find out what's going on. So meanwhile, Venus is stationing direct. And it's stationing direct in the midst of all this. It's stationing direct in a conjunction to Saturn. Over the weekend, it retrograded back past Saturn. Saturn's at 25. Venus retrograded back to 24. It's stationing direct at 24, which means it's going to continue to make a conjunction to Saturn. It's going to hold a conjunction to Saturn for about the next week and a half. This is potentially oppressive. Venus is the stronger planet in Pisces. Venus is exalted in Pisces. Saturn has no special dignity in Pisces, but it has been doing the job of playing cleanup to the emotional mess that has been created by 15 years of Neptune in Pisces, which is ending. Neptune is in early Aries. It'll make one last brief visit back to Pisces later in the year. But it is at the moment it is in Aries, and so Venus is going to be holding this conjunction to Saturn for a while, and this is a chance to yet another way to find out where it hurts. It's yet another way to figure out how it is that you can go inside and find out what is going on for you. If you're experiencing some form of depression, some form of frustration, some form of an inability to express yourself, go inside and find out what it is you really need to say and try saying it. And if you are afraid to say what you really feel, make a careful note of that and think of all the other people who are afraid to say what they really feel and maybe encourage them to do so. So this retrograde of Venus, it eventually goes back into Aries. It goes back past the point where it began, but I think that one of the big humps here is this Venus-Saturn conjunction. Now remember, Venus and Saturn can work together quite well. This we know from Vedic astrology, which honors the fact that Venus is the ruling planet of Libra, and Saturn is exalted in Libra. So Saturn and Venus make friends in Libra, and that friendship can extend to wherever they happen to meet up. But in Pisces, it's a little thick. It's a little bit challenging. But this full moon is likely to move things along. It is likely to kind of get the party started, and this is because we've got a lot of planets hanging out in this range of like 23 to 27 degrees, 23 to 28 degrees. I'll read them all off. Planets that are all working in this way, corresponding, I'm going to go around the zodiac anti-clockwise. So that includes the moon, and then there is Venus, Saturn, the North Node, Mercury, Chiron, the Sun, Eris, Uranus, Mars, and the South Node. That's actually most of the things using a fairly expanded chart set that are all going to be getting into the action at the same time over the weekend. Okay, so let's say you hear what I'm saying and you want to go deeper into the work. Maybe you feel like you need some therapy, but you don't know where to go for therapy. Maybe there's something else you can do. Please visit me at the Astrology Boutique, astrology.boutique. You can see it's listed all over the place. There'll be a link from wherever you're hearing this podcast. And here you get a chance to do an hour and 15 minutes of work with me for about $33. That's a small fraction of the price of therapy. What I do is not therapy, but I promise you that it is as effective as therapy, especially if you've been listening to me for a while and have built up a sense of trust in who I am and what I have to say. If there's something about my worldview that you like, if there's something about my tone and my temperament and the way that you see me relating to people, not that you don't know the people that you don't know, but you see me relating to people quite a bit in interviews and in my articles, the way that I report on people, especially the ones that I think are complete criminals. I tend to have a kind and gentle view of humanity. And if you relate to the way, if you resonate with who I am and what I have to say, that's very important for someone from whom you're seeking some form of help. Check me out at the Astrology Boutique. You will find many, many options. We've announced the Taurus reading. The Aries reading is still fresh. The Pisces reading is still fresh. We have readings called Astrology Studio readings for all of the signs. And then a recent project called The Awakening, which came out at the very end of 2024 for all of 2025 and for the faithful. Now, where do you begin? Doesn't matter. Pick one thing that resonates with you. Maybe find out your rising sign. Forget about that. Just pick something for your sun sign and give it a try. If it's not helpful, I will refund your money. I'm not interested in making any money at all from anyone who I do not explicitly assist. Make your life better in some way. Open up the conversation. By the way, the same is true with my horoscopes. One of the ways my horoscopes have traditionally been used is for the relationship check-in. Give your girlfriend or your boyfriend the whole column, the horoscope for their sign, the horoscope for your sign. Email it to them in some way. Ask them if they relate to it in any way and what they have to say. This can get a conversation started. But as far as the longer readings are concerned, usually an hour and 15 minutes or so of audio or video, these are designed to help you do deep work and to assist as kind of a homeopath. I'm giving you a look into a sample of who you are astrologically in this tremendously painful and chaotic time that seems to lack all meaning, empathy, and understanding. You will find that with my work at Planet Waves. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being part of the Planet Waves community. Thank you to all who support my projects by being a subscriber or a customer. Signing off from Kingston, New York at 10:01 a.m. Lots of love, and bye for now.